Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim and you're watching Turkey Diplomacy. Today, we're starting with a critical moment in global affairs. The high-stakes NATO summit is underway in The Hague, where world leaders are grappling with rising tensions and defense priorities. Anews editor Mustafa Kocakanar and political analyst Dr. Abdunur Toumi will join me today to discuss the latest developments in the Iran-Israel conflict and what it means for the Middle East. Plus, we'll address the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the occupied Gaza Strip, where Israeli actions continue to devastate lives. Stay with us as we explore these pivotal issues.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan held a bilateral meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday on the sidelines of the NATO summit in The Hague. The meeting focused on a wide range of regional and global developments, with both leaders reaffirming their commitment to enhancing cooperation between Turkey and the United States. President Erdoğan welcomed the ceasefire reached between Israel and Iran, describing it as a positive step achieved through the efforts of President Trump. He expressed hope that the truce would serve as a foundation for lasting regional peace and stability. Erdoğan also emphasized the urgent need for an end to the ongoing crisis in Gaza, underlining the importance of international engagement to halt the humanitarian suffering. Additionally, he reiterated Turkey's call for diplomatic dialogue to resolve the war in Ukraine. The meeting also addressed the future of bilateral relations. President Erdoğan highlighted the untapped potential for cooperation in key sectors such as energy, investment, and defense. He noted that advancing joint initiatives in these areas could help the two countries reach their long-standing goal of increasing trade volume to $100 billion. Both leaders underscored the strategic importance of NATO and emphasized the need to strengthen the alliance's deterrence posture. As two leading allies within NATO, Erdoğan and Trump agreed on the necessity of maintaining unity and resilience in the face of shared security challenges. The meeting marked a continuation of Turkey's diplomatic efforts to balance regional engagement with transatlantic solidarity, and signaled a mutual interest in revitalizing the Turkey-US partnership amid a complex global environment.
I'm here in The Hague in the Netherlands, where world leaders are meeting for a historic NATO summit. U.S. President Donald Trump seems poised to get his allies to agree to an increase in defense spending. He wants countries to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. The current NATO norm is 2%. On the sidelines of the event, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be meeting with Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof, but will not have a seat at the big table in what is seen as a diplomatic downgrade.
Welcome back to the program. Anews editor Mustafa Kocakanar, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Omar.
Mustafa, let's start with the meeting between Turkish President Erdoğan and his American counterpart, Donald Trump. They met yesterday in The Hague. The NATO summit is ongoing today. World leaders are there from 45 different countries, and the Dutch king is hosting the event as well. Now, when the two leaders met last night, they expressed satisfaction with the ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Erdoğan also called upon ending the war in Gaza, the Israeli actions that have massacred over 56,000 people. And also there were trade talks as well, which Turkey wants the United States to, reach to that level, which is approximately $100 billion. We're talking about $100 billion. So, Mustafa, how are you looking at this meeting between the two presidents? And, the Turkish government has also stated that, we have to end these conflicts, and this is probably a good time to, discuss those issues.
Omar, North Atlantic Treaty Organization's leaders are gathering in The Hague today, and they are set to exchange views on the many important topics in terms of navigating regional and international security challenges. And as you know, Turkey became the member of NATO in 1952, and since then Turkey has been one of the most important countries in terms of contributing to NATO's security architecture. And yesterday, on the sidelines of the NATO leaders summit, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan met with his American counterpart Donald Trump, and Trump and Erdoğan discussed all aspects of bilateral political, economic, and military relationships between Ankara and Washington. They also exchanged views on the regional and international security challenges. As you know, right now in the world politics, there are many complex geopolitical issues to deal with. First of all is the conflict between Iran and Israel. As you know, 2 weeks ago, Israeli security forces launched unprecedented and major air strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, military installations, and oil infrastructure. Iranian security forces retaliated against the Israeli strikes. On the other hand, over the weekend, the United States also joined Israel's military campaign against Iran, targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. U.S. President Donald Trump successfully claimed that the United States destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. But yesterday, Trump announced a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. But right now, both sides have been trading barbs over the ceasefire violations. Trump also accuses both Iran and Israel of violating the truce brokered by the United States. Yesterday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan welcomed U.S.-brokered ceasefire between Iran and Israel. As you know, since the very beginning of the crisis between Iran and Israel, Turkey has been calling for dialogue and diplomacy to deal with the bilateral or multilateral problems between two arch rivals in the Middle East, because Turkey thinks that the Middle East cannot bear the burden of another regional war in the region. As you also know, there is another humanitarian crisis in the Middle East, and it is the Gaza issue. Since October 7, 2023, Israeli security forces have been murdering more than 55,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, living in the occupied Gaza Strip. Turkey has been always trying to increase international awareness about Israel's ethnic cleansing policies in the region. Turkish decision makers are accusing their Israeli counterparts of escalating the geopolitical tensions in the region. Yesterday, President Erdoğan expressed Turkey's political stance on the two-state solution in the Middle East to his American counterpart, Donald Trump. Turkey is expecting concrete steps from the United States in terms of bringing long-standing peace and stability to the region. On the other hand, two leaders also discussed bilateral relationships between two important NATO allies. As you know, there are Turkey has been enjoying close relationships with the United States in all fields, ranging from politics and economy to trade and military. On the other hand, there are also some issues poisoning the bilateral relationships between Ankara and Washington. In his first presidency, Trump excluded Turkey from F-35 stealth fighter jets program. Turkey was one of the most important contributors to F-35 program, but over its acquirement of S-400 air defense systems from Russia, United States decided to exclude Turkey from the F-35 stealth fighter jets program. United States also imposed sanctions on Turkey under the CAATSA. CAATSA means countering American adversaries through Sanctions Act. But right now there have been negotiations between Turkish and American sides to deal with the F-35 stealth fighter jets program. I hope both nations will find a common way or common sense to strengthen bilateral relationships between two important NATO allies.
Mustafa, a few months ago we saw how Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, when you're talking about the F-35 issues and when you're talking about CAATSA and the F-16 upgrades, we saw a few months ago how Hakan Fidan was in Washington and he met Marco Rubio and they discussed. So the relationship with the United States is, has been fluctuating. It has been good, but especially with President Trump, the relationship has been excellent between Erdoğan and Trump. With Biden, we saw there were some issues. But Mustafa, a question that I have now is, how would Turkey support the Iranian cause at this summit? Because Turkey has a good relationship with the United States, but there are other countries, for example, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, Spain, Germany. So how will Turkey, bring up that cause over there and the, whatever's happening in the occupied Gaza Strip, the Israeli massacre of Palestinians. How will Turkey put these two issues? Because the other countries at the summit are, pro-Israel. Majority of them are pro-Israel. They have taken different stances, but, at the end of the day, they are supporting the Israeli side against Iran and in the occupied Gaza Strip. So how will Turkey bring this proposal forward to protect the Iranians and the Gazans?
Omar, right now, I think in the Middle East, there are two important geopolitical blocs competing with each other. One bloc is the Western one, and Western countries are always reaffirming their strong support for Israel's national security demands in the region. They are sending huge amount of military equipment to Israel to defend itself against so-called security threats in the region. France, Germany, and United States are always reiterating support for Israel. On the other hand, there is also another bloc in the region, and it is the Eurasian one. And Eurasian nations are also reiterating support for Iran's right to defend itself against Israeli and American aggression. But there is a difference between two important blocs in the region. While the Western countries are militarily supporting Israel in terms of encountering Iranian threats in the region, Eurasian bloc is only diplomatically and politically supporting Iran. And on the other hand, I think right now it is up to Turkey to reconcile security demands coming from both sides, because Turkey has been enjoying close relationships with both Eurasian nations and Western countries. Turkey is one of the most important allies within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And I think Turkey is bringing Iran-Israel dispute to the table today to discuss what can be done in terms of reaching new nuclear deal between United States and Iran. As you know, Turkey has been hosting peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in terms of putting an end to the ongoing conflicts in the Eastern Europe. And international community, Western countries in particular, is praising Turkey's diplomatic initiatives and efforts to bring long-standing peace and stability to the region. Maybe just like that, Turkey will host peace talks between Iran and West. Maybe Turkey will facilitate the ongoing nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States. I think that Western countries will be ready to take Turkey's security demands into the consideration if they want to see long-standing and sustainable peace and tranquility in the Middle East.
Mustafa, another leader who is present in The Hague today is Zelensky. And of course, the Russia-Ukraine war has been a key component for NATO leaders as well. They have been discussing about how to end this war in Ukraine and how to end the Russian aggression. Turkey also holds a balanced position. If you look at other countries, for example, if you look at the EU and the United States, they have backed Ukraine ever since the war began. This year, we saw President Trump was trying his best to end the war in Ukraine. He was talking with leaders from both Russia and Ukraine. He held talks with Zelensky and Putin, both of them. But we did not see any, concrete negotiations or a ceasefire. There were many concerns that were raised by the Ukrainian side and also the Russian side. The Ukrainian side said Russia must back off completely. It should release the territories that it has seized. And Russia said that it won't do that. So how are you looking at the Russia-Ukraine war? And leaders are definitely going to discuss this. Zelensky is there. So do you think that there is going to be much more military spending for Ukraine, or they're going to take a different stance? Because we saw how President Trump has been opposing the Ukrainian president.
Omar, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is seeking security assurances from Western allies. And as you know, Trump promised to put an end to the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia within 24 hours. But Trump came to the office in January for his second presidential term. But right now we are in June, and 5 months have passed since then. And right now there is no solution for Ukraine-Russia war. And Turkey hosted several peace negotiations between Ukrainian and Russian sides to discuss the possibility possible terms for ceasefire or long-standing peace deal. Turkey has been trying to play an important role between Ukraine and Russia to reach a peace deal between two neighbors in the Eastern Europe. But there are several demands coming from both sides to deal with their bilateral problems. Ukraine is calling for full withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine. On the other hand, as you know, in 2014, Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea. No one from Western countries, including Turkey, is recognizing the illegal annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation. Russia is pushing for the recognition of the Crimea as Russian territory. But right now, many nations are against the recognition of the Crimea, annexation of Crimea by Russia. And these demands, I think, right now need to be reconciled. And it is up to Turkey to reconcile security demands coming from both Ukraine and Russia, because we know that Turkey has been enjoying close relationships with both Ukraine and Russia. Turkey has been always reiterating its strong support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and political sovereignty. But we know that Western countries are eager to exclude Russia from the negotiating table in terms of halting conflicts in the region. But Turkey has been always pursuing a balanced approach to the Ukraine-Russia war. Turkey has been always claiming that there will be no winners at ongoing wars, and there will be no losers in just peace. Within this context, Turkey is always trying to bring both warring sides to the same negotiating table to exchange views on the terms for possible ceasefire or peace deal. But on the other hand, we know that at the end of February, U.S. President Donald Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance diplomatically humiliated Zelensky in front of the international media in the White House, and it is clearly showing that the United States is eager to give up its military support for Ukraine to deal with Russian aggression in the region. United States also tried to normalize its bilateral relationships with Russia. They hold several negotiations in Saudi Arabia. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, but these talks didn't yield positive results in terms of normalizing bilateral relationships between Moscow and Washington. And it is clearly showing that everyone is trying to prioritize dialogue and diplomacy. But Turkey's approach, I think, is realistic in terms of bringing long-standing peace and stability to the Eastern Europe.
Mustafa, let's go back to the Middle East. Qatar was attacked 2 days ago by Iran. Not exactly Qatar, but the American military base in Qatar. So directly Qatar was targeted. Iran informed Qatari officials and American officials before attacking. Before the attack took place, the Americans moved their equipment to Saudi Arabia, to their bases in Saudi Arabia. Now, if you look at the bases and the military, impression in the Middle East, there are around 19, I think there are 19 or 20 military bases in the Middle East with over 40,000 personnel. And one of those air bases, which was the Al Udeid air base in Qatar, that was attacked. Now, tensions are high. Saudi Arabia thinks it could be attacked as well. The UAE is also thinking there's fear in the region, basically. So now that we have a ceasefire, do you think it will hold? And what could make that, complicated? There are so many things that are happening at the moment, because Trump has said, yesterday we saw Trump use some explicit language saying that the leaders of both Iran and Israel don't know what they're doing. So do you think the ceasefire will hold, or there will be more complications?
Mar, ceasefire is holding right now, but as we mentioned that the United States joined Israel's military campaign against Iran over the weekend, and Iranian decision makers were supposed to retaliate against the American strikes in order to satisfy their public opinion. And at the beginning of this week, Iranian security forces symbolically retaliated against American air strikes by targeting American base in Qatar. But we know that Trump also announced that Iranians informed both Qatar and United States in advance about their retaliation. And it is clearly showing that Iran does not want to escalate geopolitical tensions in the region with the United States. Yes, they also also retaliated against Israeli strikes. But yesterday, as we mentioned, that United States announced ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But right now, ceasefire is holding, but geopolitical tensions remain high in the region. Security forces are on high alert from both Iran and Israel because they are accusing each other of violating ceasefire brokered by the U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump also is urging both sides to fully comply with the ceasefire deal. It is clearly showing that right now geopolitical tensions are de-escalating in the Middle East. Turkey also played an important role in terms of facilitating talks between two sides. Qatar also played an important role in terms of reaching a ceasefire. But Gulf nations are always expressing their concerns about the large scale of regional war in the region, because we know that these nations are hosting many important American bases in their territory. And Iran warned them if the United States uses these bases to launch strikes against its territory, these bases will be legitimate targets for the Iranian security forces. And it is clearly sparking fears among Gulf countries. They are also trying to prioritize diplomacy and dialogue in terms of bringing long-standing peace and stability to the region. And I hope that Iran and Israel will comply with the ceasefire agreement, because we know that the Middle East cannot bear a burden of regional war in the region, because people deserve to live in the Middle East with dignity and peace.
Musa, thanks for that analysis. We'll be right back with you. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has called on all parties to fully respect the ceasefire between Iran and Israel, emphasizing that regional peace depends on strict adherence to the truce and renewed diplomatic efforts.
NATO'nun ikinci büyük kara ordusunu sevk ve idare eden bir müttefikiz. Ülkemizin savunma yeteneklerini sürekli geliştirirken İttifakın caydırıcılığına da katkıda bulunuyoruz.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has departed for the Netherlands to attend the NATO summit in The Hague. At the top of the agenda is a revamped defense investment pledge aimed at aligning member states' military spending with the realities of a transformed security environment in Europe.
Bu savaş sonsuza kadar süremez. Barış için kolları sıvamak, İstanbul'da kurulmuş diyalog zeminini güçlendirerek barış masasını çok daha üst düzeyde bir katılımla ortaya koymak lazım.
Adding to the urgency are tensions in the Middle East, where flare-ups such as U.S. airstrikes on Iran and the risk of regional escalation have underscored the importance of coordinated NATO strategy.
Tüm tarafları ateşkese tam riayet etmeye davet ediyoruz. Daha önce de ifade ettim. Bölgemiz etkileri tüm dünyada hissedilecek bir savaşın yükünü kaldıramaz. Ellerin tetikten çekilmesi ve itilafların çözülmesi için diplomasiye şans tanınması en doğru, hayırlı ve akılcı tavır olacaktır.
Turkey also reaffirmed its readiness to continue supporting Syria in various fields under the framework of mutual agreements and shared regional priorities.
Suriye yönetimi DAEŞ dahil bütün terör örgütleriyle mücadelede son derece kararlı. Biz de kendilerine gereken desteği veriyoruz.
Appreciate that. Perhaps you want to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me first, before I go to spending, I just want to recognize your decisive action on Iran.
Thank you.
You are a man of strength, but you're also a man of peace. And the fact that you are now also successful in getting this ceasefire done between Israel and Iran, I really want to commend you for that.
Thank you.
And I think this is important for the whole world. Then on spending, it's absolutely true. I want to state here, without President Trump, this would not have happened in 3 stages. When you became president in 2016, 2017, you forced Europeans and Canadians to pay more. At this moment, result of that phase is 1 trillion extra aggregate defense spending by the Canadians and the Europeans. Then came phase 2, when you became president in January last year. Phase 2 is that all the countries not yet on 2% have now committed to the 2%. This is the old goal from Wales in 2014. 7 were not on 2%. Some were saying somewhere in the 2030s. Now this year, all of them, including Canada, including Italy, including Belgium, they have all now committed to the 2%. And now comes the big splash. Today, we will decide to go to 5%. We have to keep ourselves safe from our adversaries, but also because it is fair to equalize with the United States. With this 5%, the Europeans and the Canadians will equalize their defense spending with the United States. So this is not about American taxpayers paying more. This is about Europeans, Canadians paying more. And again, this would not have happened. I'm really saying this here. And some people might criticize me, but then when I speak with them, they all say, yes, you're right. This would not have happened if you would not have been elected in 2016 and re-elected last year and back into office in January. So I want to thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great victory for everybody, I think. And we will be equalized very shortly, and that's the way it has to be. It's going to be a lot of money, too, a lot of defense.
Trillions extra.
Yeah, and we have a great relationship, and we've had a great relationship from the beginning. Highly respected man, and yeah, we appreciate you being here too, everybody. We really do. We have a tremendous group of people on my left and a tremendous group of people on my right. They might be even better than my people. Let's have a fight. Let's figure it out. Anyway, but we appreciate it, and we've had a tremendous relationship, Mark and I, and we've really worked on this subject for a long time. And when Biden was here, it just died like everything else died. And now it's, you're going to take, I guess, a vote today, right?
Absolutely. Today we will decide unanimously to do it. So that's my absolute conviction.
So we can't talk about it until the vote's taken, because sometimes, you know, strange things happen to a vote. But I think you're going to.
I'm not too worried.
I think you're going to do very well. Everyone's very happy about it. Go ahead. Yes.
Mr. President, how is the Iran-Israel ceasefire going, in your opinion, at the moment?
I think very good. Israel came back yesterday. I was so proud of them. Because they came back, you know, they went out because they felt there was a violation, and technically they were right, but it just wouldn't have worked out very well. And they brought the planes back. They had gone on to another journey because there was a little bit of a violation, and I said, you got to get them back. And they came back, and it was a great thing, and it's going very well.
Mr. President, what is your response to the foreign minister saying he still wants to enrich nuclear?
Hello, Katie. She's so great this way. Any question she asks, I'll answer. Well, maybe I better not say it. What was your question?
What is your response to the Iranian foreign minister continuing to say Iran will enrich uranium and pursue nuclear weapons?
Well, I don't know if they've said that, but I'll tell you, the last thing they want to do is enrich anything right now. They want to recover. And we won't let that happen. Number one, militarily we won't. I think we'll end up having somewhat of a relationship with Iran. I see it. Look, I've had a relationship over the last 4 days. They agreed to the ceasefire. And it was a very equal agreement. They both said, that's enough. They both said it. But no, they won't do that. The last thing they want to do, Katie, is enrich. They're not looking to... They're not... Can you imagine after all of that, they're going to say, oh, let's go and do a bomb. You know, there could be a day in the future, and then somebody else taking our place will be saying, don't do it. And maybe they won't do it as well, I don't know. But they're not going to have a bomb, and they're not going to enrich. And we believe all of the stuff is down there. We don't think they had nearly the time, because to get that out is a very difficult thing. It's not like moving a package or taking this carpet up and moving it. It's very difficult, it's very dangerous to do. We believe it's all down there. We had a tremendous victory, a tremendous hit, and because of that, I don't think they would have been down there, because they knew we were coming. When they know we're coming, they're not going to be down in that, 30 stories underground. So, no, I think it was just a tremendous victory for everybody, including Iran. Look, they've got a country, and they've got oil, and they're very smart people, and they can come back. Israel got hit very hard, especially the last couple of days. Israel was hit really hard. Those ballistic missiles, boy, they took out a lot of buildings. And they've been great. Bibi Netanyahu should be very proud of himself. And they've really been great. But they're not going to be building bombs for a long time.
Mr. President, what's your reaction to the intelligence reports saying that the Iranian nuclear sites were only partially devastated, not entirely.
Yeah, well, they said it was actually, the report said it could have been very, they don't know. I mean, they did a report. I could have Pete talk to it because his department did the report. They really don't know. I think Israel's going to be telling us very soon because Bibi is going to have people involved in that whole situation. We hear it was obliteration. It was a virtual obliteration. When you take a look at the ground above, don't forget the flame is all underground. But everything above, if you look at the before and the after picture, everything above is burned black. The trees, everything. There's one building, but that's a building that sunk substantially into the granite, so that, you know, the fire goes right over it. It was, I believe it was total obliteration. I believe they didn't have a chance to get anything out because we acted fast. If it would have taken 2 weeks maybe, but it's very hard to remove that kind of material. Very hard and very dangerous for them to remove it. Plus, they knew we're coming, and if they know we're coming, they're not going to be down there. There aren't too many people that are going to be down there. Pete, do you have something to say about that?
Well, Mr. President, when you talk to the people who built the bombs, understand what those bombs can do, and deliver those bombs, they landed precisely where they were supposed to, so it was a flawless mission.
Flawless.
Right down where we knew they needed to enter, and given the 30,000 pounds of explosives and capability of those munitions, it was devastation underneath Fordo. And the amount of munitions, 6 per location, any assessment that tells you it was something otherwise is speculating with other motives. And we know that because when you actually look at the report, by the way, it was a top secret report, it was preliminary, it was low confidence. All right, so this is you make assessments based on what you know.
And it said it could be very devastating, very serious.
Moderate to severe, and we believe far more likely severe and obliterated. So this is a political motive here.
Is there a leak investigation?
Of course. We're doing a leak investigation with the FBI right now because this information is for internal purposes, battle damage assessments, and CNN and others are trying to spin it to make the president look bad when this was an overwhelming success.
We had a tremendous success, and this is the New York Times. I call it the failing New York Times. It's going to hell. And CNN, which, as you know, very few people are watching. And you would think they'd do the opposite. You would think they'd want to say, this was an unbelievable success. And the thing that hurts me is it's really demeaning to the pilots and the people that put that whole thing together, the generals. That was a perfect operation. And when you look at the holes, and this was done from 52,000 feet, there was no moon, there was no light, and those 3 holes are right together. And also, and nobody talks about this, we shot 30 Tomahawks from submarines, in particular one submarine, but that was 400 miles away. And every one of those Tomahawks hit within a foot of where they were supposed to hit, took out a lot of buildings that Israel wasn't able to get. We took them out with Tomahawks. We don't even talk about that. This was a devastating attack, and it knocked them for a loop. And you know, if it didn't, they wouldn't have settled. If they had won, if we didn't take it out, they wouldn't have settled. Somebody mentioned that to me last night. If that thing wasn't devastated, they would have never settled. Marco, do you have something to say?
No, first of all this stuff about the intelligence, this is what a leaker is telling you the intelligence says. That's the game these people play. They read it, and then they go out and characterize it the way they want it characterized, and they're leakers. This is the game they play. So that's number one. Number two, here's a fact. The conversion facility, which you can't do a nuclear weapon without a conversion facility. We can't even find where it is, where it used to be on the map. You can't even find where it used to be because the whole thing is just blackened out. It's gone.
It's wiped out.
It's wiped out. Then we dropped 12 of the strongest bombs on the planet right down the hole in 2 places. Everything underneath that mountain is in bad shape. And I refer you to the statement of the IAEA, Mr. Grossi. You know what he said? He said there was Iran, the way it looked the day before the attack, and what their nuclear program looks like now. 2 very different things. They are way behind where they were just 7 days ago. Now, anything in the world can be rebuilt. But now we know where it is, and if they try to rebuild it, we'll have options there as well. But all this leaker stuff, these leakers are professional stabbers. That's what they are. They go out and they read this stuff, and then they tell you what it says against the law, but they characterize it for you in a way that's absolutely false. There's no way Iran comes to the table somehow nothing had happened. This was complete and total obliteration. They're in bad shape. They are way behind today compared to where they were just 7 days ago because of what the president did.
Marco, can I just alert you to one other aspect? So the great thing is you took out the nuclear capability of Iran. This was crucial. You did it in a way which is extremely impressive. But the signal it sends to the rest of the world that this president, when it comes to it, yes, he's a man of peace, but if necessary, he is willing to use strength, the enormous strength of the American military. So I think that signal to the rest of the world, this is far beyond Iran, is extremely important. So let me also point us to that aspect of what happens.
They went down, Iran went down to the site afterwards. They said it's so devastated, and they settled when they saw what we did to it. And frankly, if we didn't do that, they would have had a lot of ammunition to keep going. They wouldn't have settled. Somebody brought that up, and 2 Iranians went down to see it, and they called back, and they said, this place is gone. So it's just fake news by CNN, which has got no ratings. It's a failed network. Anybody here from CNN, by the way? Because you're a really disgraceful network. MSNBC, I think, is actually worse. But they're all pretty bad. But yours is good, Katie, I'll tell you.
How long do you think
you know what Marco reminded me that he did such a nice job there? It was 9 years ago I had to debate this guy. It was not easy. I think he even got better. But when you were into your little thing, I said, this is when I had to debate this guy. You think it's easy to debate him? It's not easy.
How long do you think that the Iranian nuclear program has been put back by these strikes? Years or totally obliterated? How
I
long
think basically decades, because I don't think they'll ever do it again. I just don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to take their oil, they're going to have some missiles, and they'll have some defense. I think they've had it. I mean, they just went through hell. I think they've had it. The last thing they want to do is enrich. They've been trying to do it. By the way, it's hard to enrich. And, you know, when you look at a site like that, very, very hard to build. Very, very hard, very expensive. They spent trillions of dollars trying to do this thing, and they didn't come up with it. And we're actually getting along with them very well right now. But had we not succeeded with that hit ended the war. That hit ended the war. I don't want to use an example of Hiroshima. I don't want to use an example of Nagasaki. But that was essentially the same thing. That ended that war. This ended that with the war. If we didn't take that out, they'd be fighting right now.
Mr. President,
yeah.
If the Iranians do rebuild, would the United States...
If they rebuild?
Would the United States strike again? And I have also a question about Russia.
I'm not going to have to worry about that. It's gone for years. Very tough to rebuild because the whole thing has collapsed. In other words, inside, it's all collapsed. Nobody can get in to see it because it's collapsed. You can't go in to see a room that has, 10 million tons of rock in it. And the tunnels are totally collapsed.
But if they rebuild?
Well, they've already looked at the tunnels. This was an unbelievable hit by genius pilots and genius people in the military, and they're not being given credit for it because we have scum that's in this group, and not all of you are. You have some great reporters, but you have scum. CNN is scum. MSDNC is scum. The New York Times is scum. They're bad people. They're sick. And what they've done is they're trying to make this unbelievable victory into something less. Now, even they admit that it was hit very hard, okay? But it wasn't hit hard. It was hit brutally, and it knocked it out. The original word that I use, I guess it got us in trouble because it's a strong word. It was obliteration. And you'll see that. And it's going to come out. Israel is doing a report on it now, I understand. And I was told that they said it was total obliteration. They have guys that go in there after the hit, and they say it was total obliteration. And, I don't want it for me. I want it for the pilots. I want it for the military. They did such a good job. If you were in the Situation Room with me, with the generals and all of the people that did such a good job, and then they get demeaned by these idiots at CNN who can't get ratings, the place is dying, nobody wants to even waste their time going on their shows. So they form with the New York Times, who's dying also. Without Trump, you wouldn't have a New York Times.
And then just changing gears to your meeting with Zelensky later today, can you give us any preview of what the two of you might be discussing?
No, well, we'll discuss the obvious. We'll discuss his difficulties. He's got a little difficulty. Zelensky, a nice guy. I mean, I'm going to meet him today. I don't know. I assume we're going to be discussing Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the most
likely. Is there any restart talks there or anything that you might do?
Well, we're going to see. I mean, I've spoken to Putin a lot, and he actually was very nice. He volunteered help on, as you know, on Iran. I said, no, I don't need help on Iran. I need help on Russia. Okay? I said, do me a favor. Help us on Russia, not on Iran, but he was very nice. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk. I think progress is being made. I think great progress is being made on Gaza. I think because of this attack that we made, I think we're going to have some very good news. I was talking to Steve Witkoff, who, by the way, is terrific, and who knows more about this subject than anybody, the subject of what we were just talking about. He was on last night with Jesse and with Laura and with Sean. And boy, Susan, he has a great take on it. He just explains it so easily. He's really very knowledgeable. But he did tell me that Gaza is very close.
Mr. President, just one follow-up on Iran. Both you and Secretary Rubio and Hegseth mentioned the leakers. But can you clarify, is the intelligence correct or is the intelligence wrong?
Well, the intelligence was very inconclusive. Okay. The intelligence says we don't know. It could have been very severe. That's what the intelligence says. So I guess that's correct. But I think we can take that we don't know. It was very severe. It was obliteration. And you'd think that a media outlet would say, isn't that a great thing? I mean, more importantly for the pilots, for the military, you take their guts out. You take their absolute guts out. They had a tremendous attack. It was a complete obliteration. The other team, the other group, Iran, said, let's stop this. And you know what? Israel said it too. Very smart. They fought like hell, and then they said, let's stop. And they're going to build themselves. And I really see it as sticking. I mean, we may do papers on it, Marco. Maybe we're going to do papers. I don't even know if you need them. They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
That daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
I think we have to join the others.
Yes, we're going to join some other group. Yes, thank you. Katie,
Just one last question. Do you believe this is strike?
She's so good. That's really
Thank you, Mr. President.
She used to be very difficult. Go ahead.
Do you believe that this strike on the Iranian nuclear program will lead to the release of the hostages in Gaza?
I think that it helped a little bit. It showed a lot of power. Yeah, I think it helped. But we're going to get separately, even before this, we were very close to making a deal on Gaza. I think this helped, yes. Okay, thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, President.
So they will see you in the plane.
Thank you, President.
See you stand.
Welcome back to the program. That was U.S. President Donald Trump, his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State in The Hague, talking to the NATO Secretary General. Mustafa, I'll talk to you about what has been said right now. Donald Trump said that, we use the strongest bomb on the planet. We've destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. What do you make of these statements? Because, he also mentioned about he also mentioned about Zelensky and Putin, saying Zelensky's a nice guy and that he's spoken to Putin. What do you make of these statements right before the main conference begins?
Well, it is crystal clear that American decision makers declared a victory against Iran. As you know, U.S. President Donald Trump, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth praised America's latest military campaign against Iran's nuclear facilities. As you know, Israel pledged to destroy Iran's nuclear program, but we know that Israeli security forces have no capability to totally destroy Iran's nuclear program, because we know that Iran established some of its nuclear facilities underground, and only United States has bunker busters in its military inventory. And over the weekend, American security forces used bunker busters to destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities. And Trump, Rubio, and Hegseth claimed victory against Iran, and they claimed that the United States totally obliterate Iran's nuclear program. But on the other hand, some intelligence reports are claiming that United States didn't destroy Iran's nuclear program. nuclear program, it only delays Iran's nuclear ambition. It is clearly showing that there is a contradiction between the American decision makers and intelligence services. We will see what happens to Iran's nuclear facilities in the foreseeable future, I think. As you also mentioned that Trump also talked about Ukraine-Russia war. He called both Zelensky and Putin a nice guy. He claimed that Putin offered help to reach a deal with Iran, but Trump says that Putin can help us on the Ukraine-Russia war, because Trump has been always calling for both Russia and Ukraine to prioritize diplomacy and dialogue to hold their ongoing conflicts in the region. Maybe today Trump will welcome Zelensky on the sidelines of the NATO summit in the Hague. I don't think that Russia and Ukraine can reach any immediate ceasefire or cessation of the conflicts, given the ongoing geopolitical condition on the ground, because as we mentioned that there are several demands coming from both sides to reach a ceasefire. I think Turkey can play an important role between two warring sides in the region, because Turkey has been enjoying close relationships with both warring sides. I hope that the NATO countries, United States in particular, will take Turkey's security demands into the consideration in terms of ensuring international peace and security.
Anews editor Mustafa Kocakanar, thank you for that analysis and for being on the program.
You are welcome, Omar.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.